Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everyone. It's Paula Edgar, host of Branding Room Only podcast. And on Branding Room Only podcast, we talk to professionals and influencers about how they have built their personal brands and what their reflections are about personal brands. And today I have somebody who I've been so excited to bring to you, and her name is Crystal L. Bailey. And Crystal puts the pro in protocol as director of the Etiquette Institute of Washington. An etiquette expert and image consultant, she assists individuals in refining their executive presence, networking savvy, and fine dining finesse. Trained by Dealbreaker of London and certified by the London Image Institute, Crystal caters to a diverse global clientele, from young professionals to diplomats, and also to me. So, hi, Crystal. Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast.
Hi, Paula. It is so great to be with you.
I'm super excited about this conversation, simply because I didn't tell you this, but I just want to tell you something real quick before we started. I was at a meal the other day, a fancy dancy meal. And they were like 17 forks. There were 17 forks. There was a lot of forks, and I had no idea what to do. And I just looked towards the other person, and the other person looked towards me. And I was like, we need Crystal immediately right now. And I was like, thank goodness she is going to be on my podcast. But we're going to get into all of that because I want to talk about how your knack of knowledge of etiquette or your knowledge of etiquette can impact your brand. But y'all, everybody knows I'm excited because when I jump into something else, I'm excited. So Crystal, tell me, what does the personal brand mean to you? How do you define it?
For me, it's something that it's not a complete departure from myself. It's not something that I feel like I need to put on, but pretty much in all that I do, I filter it through that brand concept. And for me, a lot of it is lifestyle, and hopefully then that shows through professional settings that I don't feel like I'm having to put on so much.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing from that is that authenticity, that authentic space of not having to create something, but it's sort of you shining through and having a goal as to what that means. And I love that. So how do you describe yourself in 3 words or short phrases?
Sure. I'd say classic. I'm kind of an old school girl. I like classic things. And I think that shows up in a lot of ways, whether it be my attire or even presentation, I guess, as well. And I guess elegance might be another word that I use, because I do love the fine things and the nice things. And I like things to have an elegant touch to them, even if I'm just kind of at home. And I guess finally, quirky. I'm a little quirky. I've had to accept that and kind of live and roll around in it a little bit.
I love it. Classic, elegant, and quirky. I love it. Okay. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
Yes. I think the best thing that my grandmother gave me many quotes when I had her. And I guess the best one is, to have friends, you have to be a friend. And I'm not always great at that. And I think a lot of that is also, it feeds into networking too, right? That concept of being able to genuinely be interested in people, genuinely show up for people, and check in on them. And so that always courses through my mind. I'm just not very good at it.
I think it's someplace that we all, right, we're never perfect at it, right? Because there's always somebody who we haven't connected with. And, one of the reasons why I love having this podcast as a vehicle is that it allows me to connect with people who I know have a fantastic story, a skill set, something that people need to know about, like yourself. But we have not spoken in a long time, although I have spoken of you.
And I've spoken of you.
Right. And so I do think that, especially since the pandemic, we have to give ourselves some grace and also give ourselves some goals, right? Like, we can do a little bit better. And then we can also understand that we had a significant shift in our beings. And that makes it that it's hard to focus on everything else. And plus, the news cycle is wild. So all of that, just, so all my friends out there who are like, I only get to hear from you on this podcast. Hi. Hey, y'all. I love you. Okay. So do you have a hype song? And then a hype song for me is a song that you're playing when you're about to walk into a room and they can expect all of Crystal, Or if you're having a tough day, you need this song to pick you up, and it can be the same song or a different song.
Gosh, I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't think of who sings it. That's crazy. I'll look it up
Okay.
in a minute. But it's All White Party. And it's like this kind of, I don't know, trap song, but it's just all about, going to an all white party. And it really, like the beat, everything in it kind of gets me going and empowers me a little bit. So if you ever think about, getting ready to go to an all white party and you got your clothes on, and you're ready, you got your drink, but you're trying not to spill it on you, that's the vibe.
I love that. And so what I'm doing is creating a branding room only soundtrack for it. And the best part about it is that it is the genres are everywhere. They're different languages. And I think it speaks to the diversity and the power of the people who I have spoken with. So I'm loving that as a thing. So we'll get the artist to play. Okay. So Crystal, we've known each other for, gosh, now let's see, my kid, it's over 10 years. I know that much.
Yes.
And I know, I read about what you do, or I talked to the audience just now, and they're going to read your whole bio, but tell me, where are you from and sort of how you got started and what, a little more bones on what you actually do.
Sure. So I am from a very rural place in Virginia, Dinwiddie County, Virginia. Usually if someone has heard about it, they have received a ticket on the highway there heading south. So that is where I'm from. I grew up on a farm, a cattle farm, but I'm really a city girl. So my grandma, she lived in Richmond, which was the city, and I was into theater and the arts. And so I stayed with her so much of growing up just so I could be around those things. And so I have a duality. Like I love the farm and I love everything being calm and quiet, but then I absolutely love being around arts and culture. And so from there, being an arts kid and a theater kid, I headed to Howard University, studied theater there. And I said to myself, I don't know, I had like an Elle Woods moment, I guess. I was like, I'm going to go to law school. I thought about it before, I guess, growing up, but I was like, I'm going to do this. And then I can represent all of my classmates. They're all actors and they're going to be heading to LA and New York. That is what I can do. And then I somehow made it to law school and took the LSAT and did all that stuff. But I realized I wasn't into contracts and intellectual property all that much. But I was really into criminal law. And so that was a big interest of mine. But while I was in law school, I went to an etiquette dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I quit law school. No, I should have, though. Would have saved me a lot of money.
Like, wait,
what? Plot twist. No, I should have, but I finished up school, of course, and I headed to DC, worked for the federal government, but still implanted in my mind was how can I get the etiquette training to be like that woman that had taught the dining etiquette piece. Mm-hmm. And classes were insane, like the prices. I was like, coming out of school, law school, you don't have any money, especially during that time. So, okay, there were like a few videos on YouTube. So I watched like those 2 videos on YouTube back then over and over and read a lot of etiquette books. And I said, eventually I'll get to do the training, I guess, that I want to. But I just jumped in really once I had started with the government. So trying to do both for a very long time was insanity. I can just remember the days that I would be doing this huge briefing with the head of an agency. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be, at a client, an etiquette, corporate thing training that I'm supposed to trying to figure it all out, changing in the car, really craziness for quite a few years. And eventually, right before the pandemic, I left the government, which was wild. But I guess what had happened, I didn't work as an attorney while I was with the government, except the last part. I went and did a stint as a special assistant U.S. attorney. Mm-hmm. Okay, never done a trial before in my life, none of these things. And I was like, but there was a program that you could do. And I was like, I would love to do that before I leave the government, really try cases and stuff. Girl. After that, I was ready to just throw it all in. And that's literally, I think maybe I went on vacation when I got back to work, and then that was it. I was out of there, and I haven't really looked back.
Okay. So love this. This is the government commercial because I also left government, but city government in New York. But still, I mean, I think there's a lot of training you can get, but it's a lot of the tape and rigmarole that you have to go through as well to be within the government. So I get it. So tell me then, you decided that you were going to do etiquetting. So you eventually did go get training because I see that you have the fancy duets of London. So how did you do that? Like what drove you to that space?
So I guess I am thankful kind of for my, government experience. I traveled a lot extensively when I was working, and I had the opportunity to be in France and the UK for a few months. And so that's when I was like, I'm gonna save up, I'm figure it out. And that is sometimes people just want to jump out, and it's fantastic to just be able to jump out and into entrepreneurship. But, it did give me kind of a base a little bit to be able to do those things. And so, yes, I think about 2 or 3 years into my business, was able to go to Debrett's and get the training there that I really wanted. And then just this year, I went to the London Image Institute. And so for me, like every year, it's some type of piece of professional development, right? Yes. It's been 12 or 13 years for me, but etiquette evolves, the skills that we need in business have evolved so much. Yes. And so for me, it's always finding some piece of professional development. But that experience with the London Image Institute really was a piece that I was missing. And so I'm glad I was able to do that this year.
I love that because I'm passionate about professional development, not just giving it, but also getting it. I think we always have to continue iterating on ourselves. And that's a part of brand building, right? Is to make sure that you are up to date, et cetera. So I want to hear a little bit more about what you have learned as you have been telling other people about how to engage in etiquette spaces. What are some of the things that you see over and over again as mistakes people make, and things that maybe you see shifting given after the pandemic?
Oh, okay. Major shifts since the pandemic. Well, DC is interesting, and that's where I usually see people like going to work and things like that. So it was fun to see people putting their suits back on and like actually, doing business formal and stuff, because for a while I had to talk about, Zoom, dress code, I guess, and the virtual dress code and wearing soft suits and those weird things that they were selling to us during the pandemic. So it's interesting to see people kind of going back to where we were. Oh, help me with the question. I've ventured off.
No, all good. So what kinds of things do you see mistakes that people make?
Yes.
Frequently? Yeah.
So many ways, whether it be in the digital space, right? With even just email communications. A big piece of etiquette that I always, keep in mind is one, responding to people in kind. So the same way that they reached out to you, really, really important to me, because, a lot of times people will, text or, reach out in weird ways. And when we have systems in place, a lot of times you lose that information, or, it might be a friend that reaches out and it's like in a very casual way, but then you're ultimately missing out on that. So I think responding to people, the same way that either they expect to be reached out to, or having a little bit of formality to that in the business realm. And then also knowing our audience, right? The same way that I would speak to someone on my team versus a client versus, someone that's more adversarial, totally different. And I think in our communications, really thinking about who your audience is and giving a little bit of shift and deference maybe in that realm.
So when I think about just etiquette in general as a thing, I think fanciness. and I went to boarding school. And so when I was in boarding school, there were some, etiquette and protocols that we had to learn. But given my recent experience with the Thousand Forks, I want to have a tangible takeaway for the folks right now who are not Googling it. And I've seen so many people. So tell me, if I'm at a table, I got my forks on the left, I got my knives on the right. Which fork am I supposed to use first? The one closest to the plate or the one outside the plate?
Outside. So we work from the outside in. So you're working your way in down to nothing. And then if you look forward to dessert, like I do, look forward and you'll see your dessert utensils there.
Oh, so everything on top is dessert?
Everything on top should be dessert. That is not your soup spoon.
That is not your soup spoon. So everybody, can you hear my... People have been looking at me wild because I have definitely been souping and desserting at the same time. Okay, what about this? I saw this the other day as well. Are we supposed to tuck our napkin into our collar? I did not do it, but I did see it the other day.
No, we're not. But my mom like does that. And I'm like, I think she does things just to, she also says merlot, but I imagine she's doing these things just to get under my skin. She'll just take the napkin and like put it up like she's, at the beauty salon or something. No, 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 no. So the napkin, right, it's in our lap and it really shouldn't be seen. This is not something that other people want to see, your little spaghetti stains and lipstick stains. The napkin stays in the lap the entire meal until we're actually getting up from the table. Paula has paid the check. That's when we're placing the napkin. And then don't place it on your plate, but to the left.
On the left of your plate. Okay. Another question. How does the waiter know what I'm doing with my forks? Am I doing Wakanda Forever X? Does that mean I'm finished? What is that?
Okay. So the main signal that you need to know is finished, right? Because that's going to be right here. It's going to be your fork and knife together.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Kind of like a backslash, I guess. But the handles are going to be to 4:00 on your plate. Okay. So from across the room, right, server can see. They're not going to, excuse me, ma'am, are you finished? Are you finished? Right? They can see either you're still eating or you're finished. Resting is like this, kind of like a little pizza slice.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. All right. People are learning
those are the main two we need to know.
We are doing the Lord's work right now. I'm telling you, because I'm a gala girl. I love going to galas and I just look around and I'm glad when there's only one fork or one knife. So I'm like, I don't have to worry about this. But also I see things where, okay. We think what else? I'm gonna use this opportunity. So what do you see in terms of networking? Like when people are in person with each other, that you see that maybe some faux pas that you would want to correct as an etiquette.
Yes. Okay. Right. So no one invited you to the networking event because you looked hungry, but people are just like, bam, food and, colossal shrimp and crab balls. Usually the food's not that good. So I always advise to leave that alone, right? Because either you're going to be juggling food, going to be juggling drink and trying to do them both together. And it's too much. So if I go to an event, I'll have a drink, make sure you keep the beverage in your left hand so that your right hand is always free to shake hands.
Okay.
And try to, if you can, stay away from the food, but that does mean you need to eat something beforehand. So don't, go having 5 glasses of wine. Haven't had anything to eat all day. That's
yes, I've seen that as well. I've seen the folks who did not eat there or anywhere else, and but decided that the bar was at their time. Speaking of etiquette, what about, have you seen a shift in terms of people shaking hands or not post-pandemic?
So I was really concerned whether or not we would go back to shaking hands at all, right? In the height of the pandemic. But then I remembered this study I had seen where individuals are like in this doctor's examination room and they're all, hooked up and everything. And the doctor comes in, shakes their hand and leaves out of the room. And then what do? They end up sniffing their hand. Okay. But not like a sniff like this, but more of like I'm getting a whiff of that person. Like they do something so they can actually smell the hand that okay. So it sounds creepy and terrible, but right. So then the handshake to me, right, is very primal.
It's anthropological. I was going to say, it's like, it's okay. All right.
We're assessing that other person. And so that's how I had a little bit of faith that we would come back to it.
Yeah.
But there are times when we may not want to shake hands and that is okay. And before the pandemic, that would have been, my goodness, like the ultimate insult to not shake someone's hand. Right. Yeah. But now if I greet someone, I just want my hands visible. So it's so great to meet you. It's wonderful to see you. How are you doing? Right. Any of those things, but it kind of lets that person know my hands are, they're available, but not for you. And so they can see what you're doing with your hands, but you're not going for that handshake. And I think that's important. So you can't get too close if you don't plan to handshake.
I started doing this heart touch, like, hi, hello, I'm heart touching. That means I am a good person. I just don't want to touch you. But I would say that I'm in a lot of places with people who I know who know that I'm a hugger, but I never say I'm a hugger. I'm just waiting to kind of see, we're kind of doing this little dance to see if we're ready to hug. And then I get so excited because speaking of, I studied anthropology and cultures, we connect based on our eyes, our teeth, and when we actually touch each other. So to your point about the handshake, it is really important to solidify connection and also names. So when I tell people to introduce themselves, I say, look someone in the eye, and if you can, smile. and then touch their hands. If you're a handshaker, because those three things solidifies that moment for you and for them, because just anthropologically we was like resonate better. But that's probably the only thing I remember from my anthropology. But that's a whole nother thing. Okay, so tell me, you decided you were going to start, the etiquette school, and you had, that was your sort of side hustle, and I knew you did a lot with children in addition to adults. And I found that I used to always like say to my kids, I'm gonna send you to DC and put you through Crystal's boot camp because y'all are embarrassing me. They are gulpers, and it's from their father. And I'm like, it must just be the hereditary. I don't know what else to do besides I'm like, you need to sip a drink. You're not gulping, but oh well, I tried. So anyway, what do you see mostly from children versus what you see from adults when you're working with them? Is there anything that's consistent or inconsistent in those spaces?
Yeah, I see a lot of times that children are more open to the topic, right? Because we as adults have kind of, well, this is the way I've always cut my food, and I've always stabbed it like this. And so I'm going to keep stabbing, right? Whereas a kid will be like, oh, okay, like this? All right. And then they kind of take it on and they go on with it and even enjoy, the fact that they're kind of learning something new or formal. And then, a lot of times we, as I said, are set in our ways. So it's interesting. I do find, of course, that kids, they're not online Googling like, oh, let me find an etiquette class.
Right.
Whereas my adult clients, they usually are. They're doing something private. And so there's that receptiveness too, unless it's like a spouse that's like, oh, I'm giving my spouse this gift card to go to an etiquette dinner. And the person's like, how did I end up here?
Happy holidays. You need this. You need this right now. That's hilarious. I can only imagine.
And some people, have made it and they have been successful without, some of these small little finer rules. And so they might not find as much use to it. For me, I love knowing the scale of things, right? I know how to be the most formal, and that is usually what I'm teaching, so that you can scale it back a little bit. And if I have a client that's from Dallas and they have their elbows on the table, if they roll their sleeves up and they're just more relaxed, then I can do that too. But I know what I'm breaking down. I know what I'm selecting, to not follow as a rule.
So I'm glad you started saying that and thinking about regions and maybe the way that things show up differently, because as I was reflecting on this, and actually I was reading a story with my son, and it was talking about cultural differences in terms of how we eat. Some people eating with their hands, other people eating, with utensils, et cetera. And so is there any best practice when it comes to trying to be on your best game when there's a cross-cultural part of a setting that you're going to be in?
Yes. That's another time to not be completely stuck in our ways. And, whether it's going to someone's home and them asking you to take their shoes off for, a cultural reason. And that happened to me because I do a lot of in-home lessons. And so, but it was like the summertime. I didn't have a pedicure. And I was like, really? Okay. But being respectful or needing to be respectful. And I was like, can I just stand on the carpet in the ones? So, whether it be that or whether it be something with dining, as in, dining with our hands or something that you're not used to in your culture, I guess not being judgmental, right? Because a lot of times we can see that in a restaurant, we see someone or they're, really kind of lower over their soup bowl or that sort of thing. It's easy to say, oh, they're ridiculous, right? Not taking into, account their culture.
We went on vacation for Thanksgiving, and we went to a resort on an island. And when you get to the resort, they give you a cool towel. And so my son takes the towel and wipes his whole face with the towel. And it was supposed to be for your hands and your neck, like you do it. But he was like, "I'm gonna wash his face. This is a washcloth. This is what we do." I was like, it was a kind of a hot ride. Like I get it, but yeah. So to that end, I think about all the things that I see that may not be an issue for the circle that you're in, but when people are looking at you outside of the circle, they probably are judging you, and that impacts your brand. A lot of my listeners are lawyers or in other sort of professions that are white collar, and there is a lot of success in the non-tangibles, right? Not the skill set that you have, but the way in which you show up, your EQ and your IQ. And when I think about etiquette and how that shows up, I think about that because you may do something that is outside of a social moire or is outside of something that people expect, and it can impact your brand. So have you gotten questions about things like that? Or have you seen this where it's like, ooh, they did this thing and it totally derailed the situation or their whatever?
Yeah. I guess my thought is it's rare that like one little thing, right, will say make someone say, oh my God, I can't deal with this person or work with them, or I can't take them, out to client meals or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's almost a consistency of being unaware, right, of things and of the etiquette that's expected in certain spaces. And so again, we can pick and choose maybe some rules that we want to break. That's fun. I love it. But if we're consistently breaking rules and we're consistently kind of ignoring those social mores, then I think that's the problem. So it adds up. It adds up over time.
That's a good point, right? So yeah, I do think if you got all the other things or most of the other things together, that's not going to be the deal breaker. But I wonder, do you have any thoughts about how somebody can point out that someone has broken a social more or that done something outside of etiquette in a way that's kind and maybe be accepted? like what would you say to my son if he's wiping his face with a towel?
I would just snatch it.
That's exactly what I did. I'm like, give me that towel. Get over, stop embarrassing me.
I guess a lot of times we can make light of it or, make a joke. Oh my gosh, if I see you chew like that one more time, which is what I said to my sister the other day. She's really dumb. But
chewing.
So making light of it for me is usually kind of the best thing. I try not to come off as too judgmental because at the end of the day, a lot of it I don't, care about too much. It's not like, my pearls are clutched, every moment of the day. But showing people too, right? And I think if we show up, if we not correcting my mom with the pronoun like, Mom, it's Merlot, it's quinoa, right? Oh, I would love to have a glass of Merlot. Right. And then maybe she's not going to do it, but maybe someone else would listen to that and say, oh, Merlot.
Yes. Right. That's how it's said. But no, that's always me. I'm like, oh, that's how you say it.
But I'm not going to say.
Right. Say this. Right. Like, yeah. The first time I realized how quinoa was pronounced, I was like, wait, it's not quinoa? I mean, phonetically, it's quinoa. But to that end, I do think that I'm glad that you brought up the point of that. It doesn't have to be so serious and so detrimental. But I do know that a lot of people tend to be concerned. And I think about this from the associates who are diverse, who have come from different backgrounds, who are coming into spaces that they've never been before and don't quite know how to navigate and are afraid to navigate, so they just don't. Right. As opposed to doing and perhaps making a mistake and then, figuring out what is best done going forward. And I saw a general counsel speaking recently, and she was talking about going out to eat with someone. And generally, the way that things go is that somebody's from a law firm, they take somebody out who's in-house, and at a company, because they're a potential client or an actual client, they will pay for it. And she said that they just both sat there looking at the check. And she's like, wait, and then she said that she ended up paying, realizing that the associate had no idea that she was supposed to pay. And so, but then I'm like, while it's not going to impact that person forever, that story was being told, right? Like, I didn't know the specifics of the person, but I do know that that's something that's being pulled out. And I think it's important to think about what are some of the things that people may trip up on that can impact them, societally within our small society and in bigger in spaces. And that's why I wanted to ask you some of those questions.
That's really a good example, I guess, of, how something can impact us in business, right? Maybe picking up the wrong fork, right, is not going to be such a thing, but something like that stays in your mind.
Absolutely. Okay. So tell me, have there been a time, and I guess you kind of started talking about it, but when you had to pivot your own brand in order to navigate whatever you're trying to do next? Tell me about that pivot.
So, of course, the pandemic, huge crazy pivot for me, especially since I was starting off right at that point doing things full time.
Yep.
And before, you would never anywhere be able to get an etiquette training virtually. It's just not a thing. It was not done. That would be a pearl clutch in and of itself. And so finding ways to bring the training to life in a virtual space was really interesting for me. It was helpful for me to take a lot of other training courses during that time so that I could say, oh, I love this. How can I, bring the same type of energy and involvement and engagement in my trainings? And so trying to figure that out was really fun to the point that I still offer a virtual course. And there's still a great use, right? Because now I can have clients that are from all over the world and all over the country, and they can, just sign up with a click, and they don't have to bring themselves to DC or me to go to them. So I think that is kind of a great thing and something to have. But there's also this classic and traditional part of etiquette in this business where it needs to be hands-on and people want to experience the fine dining aspects of training. And so I'm glad to be back to that too.
Yeah, I can imagine that was challenging. I mean, everyone had to kind of learn, how do I do what I do via these screens? But, I think it's also it was a good way for us to learn how to stretch, right? To figure out that it doesn't always have to be the way it's always has been. But to that end, I do agree with you that kind of being in a space and understanding how things are done, you can't really feel the feel virtually in the same way that you do when you are in person. Okay, so we kind of started talking about this already, but I want to ask you a specific again. Are there any specific mistakes that you want to call out that you see people making when they are trying to network or build their brands?
I guess being overly pushy, right? And only focused on themselves, the I, where I always try to tell people to have the mindset when you're going into a networking space or even just thinking about networking is, what can I bring to other people? What kind of energy can I bring to this space? I like to put myself in the mindset of like a host so that when I go in, it's like, oh, I'm checking in on people. I could be at the bottom of the guest list, but I'm still, how are things going with you? Almost doing that kind of check-in with people. And even if I feel a little bit nervous at an event, if I switch my mindset up a little bit. So I think the biggest thing is just trying to sell, right? And not building a relationship. And I know in the US, we're so different from some other cultures where, you're over months building and developing a relationship before you do business with someone. And here, we can shoot an email to someone and, you're on a podcast or, doing whatever it might be instantly. And so just because we can doesn't mean that's the only way to do it or the best way to do it. And I think the relationship building portion is important with networking. And so not just, you should, do this or such and such and such, but, I'd love to keep in touch, right? And then we reach out and we have these touch points and it builds over time and naturally.
Right. And less transactional, right? Less, what can you do? What can I do? More about who are you and then what can we, how might we be able to collaborate? That's a pet peeve of mine, which, my audience knows I do like to do my pet peeves podcast. And that's one where it's just like, hi, nice to meet you. It's like dating. I don't know who you're dating, but I'm telling you that you're not going to get something from me immediately either. So please, let's not like this. It just should be different than that. And I think it's always better when a relationship is deeper as opposed to sort of just very surface level. It works out better and it lasts longer, I think. Okay. So do you have advice for people who are trying to build their brand?
Yes. Or I should, right? It's being consistent, going back. I still to this day go back to my business plan and I think about kind of my goals and aims that I had. And so I just keep that in the back of my mind, but it's all about consistency from the way that we, show up physically to the way that we email and communicate with others, to social media and how we present ourselves there and the design and graphics that we use, our website. So everything to me really needs to be a consistent message. And I think selecting those 3 words at the beginning with you, right? I'm always thinking about, does it have those elements of classic elegance, but with a little bit of kind of quirk and fun to it? And so everything that I do then is filtered through that. That's, I guess, my best advice is just, using a filter for everything. I mean, you think about it like a social media filter, but, everything should kind of say, oh, okay, I know exactly, what brand this is.
I sort of think of it as like a North Star, right? If you have assessed well who you are, and then also thinking about who you want to be and how you want to be regarded, those are then those three filters, right? I decided what those things are, and now is this thing that I'm going to do? Is this thing I'm going to show? Is this thing I'm going to create? Does it filter through those things? And if not, am I deliberately doing that because of XYZ reason, right? So if you then see that Paula is taking ballet classes, you'll be like, I'm not. That's not quite what I know her to be. That being said, stay tuned for next year. I'm just kidding. I'm not taking it to ballet. Just kidding. Just kidding. So what do you do for fun, Crystal?
Oh, okay. I love traveling. That is like my thing. And exploring new places. I'm a big solo traveler. And I'm an only child. I can be by myself really. Like, that's why the pandemic was like, oh, this is my happy space. But as far as, kind of just bunkering down.
Yeah.
I love that. Out of it, I, get to experience new cultures. I then am able to input that into what I do, right? So that when I have clients that are headed somewhere or from somewhere, I'm able to speak to that. So I really enjoy using it, but I really enjoy traveling, but I enjoy using it for business. And then I also really enjoy engaging with people when I'm traveling somewhere, or reaching out to see what etiquette professionals are there. And if maybe I can meet up with them or, grab a coffee and see how they are handling their business where they are. And so that's that. Yeah, I do. I love that too.
That's so smart, because then you like I said, the question I was asking about the cultural pieces, you're kind of gaining some of that insight and sharing some insight as well, which, to the point of it not just being transactional, is really, getting and giving information in a way that is helpful to both parties. I love that. Do you have one or two favorite travel destinations that come to mind?
Yes. I guess, forever in my heart will be South Africa. But I actually studied there when I was in law school. So that was just a impactful experience to see so many different sides of that country. And more recently, I'm a big, I think.
You were someplace recently. I saw this on your social, and it was, you were standing in front of water. It was gorgeous.
Yes. Well, I didn't even share this yet, but I'm saving one little image that I like, I guess, for months. But I went to India this year, and that was unreal for me. Yeah. Wow. Well, from the food to culture to, it's so much like the US, right? And that everywhere you go, just like we would go to every, different states or regions, there's such a difference in culture. So that's what I enjoyed, whether it be city, whether it be, a place that's on a lake and more relaxed, or, the insanity of some of the larger cities. It was a lot like the US in that sense. I appreciated that because you could get many different tastes of the country, which is, I have to go back. It's huge. It's ridiculous.
Literally many different tastes. I look forward to going. I'm married to a man named Taj, and I'm like, we got to take you. I got to take you there. We got to go. All right. So everybody on my podcast has to respond to two different questions. One is this. It's your stand by your brand. What aspect of your personality, your brand, will you never compromise on?
Equality. And so I want everything to be a quality. It doesn't always get to be luxury, but definitely a quality experience. And so that my clients expect that. But there are times, when I may be going to, work with a youth group or Girl Scouts or community center or something like that, where, I don't get to bring the level of luxury, but it's still going to be a quality training, and the materials that I bring, everything is still going to speak to my brand, even if it's not at that 5-star hotel. So that for me is important, that everyone still gets a quality experience.
I love that. As somebody who, I think even just recently, meaning like in the last 5 years, I have really said to myself what I deserve. We can all talk to my therapist about this, but what I want is to have elevated experiences. I don't want to have regular experiences because it's just been so clear to me the brevity of life, right? And also the need to really be present and engage in things. And when you do those things in quality and luxuries around, it's just different, right? It's just different. And I think you can access that without not necessarily having to spend a ton of money, but really thinking about what your standard is and always speaking to that standard. And so I've just been in that space of like, okay, well, if it's going to be something, an elevated thing, I want to elevate with it. I want to be in that space. All right. So tell me this, and maybe some similar. So branding room only is a spinoff of standing room only, right? And so if you think about people gathering in a room, a crowd where there's standing room only because there's so much clamoring about Crystal being on the stage for them to experience something, for them to see something that you have, your magic. What is that magic? What is that?
I guess for me, it's hard to explain, but I just have a passion that, sometimes I'll have a really, really crazy day. We're doing like 3 trainings and something like ridiculous. And then I'll be like, oh my gosh, I just love this, right? I just love this. Like I'll just take one breath and I really love this. And so for me, it's a genuine love for what I do. And I'm thankful because every day and week and month and year has been different for me in the business.
Yeah.
But really the idea that every time I go to someone, it's a different experience. It's not ever just, robotic for me. I love that and appreciate that.
I love
getting
that.
to meet, so many different people. So yeah, I think just that little, I really love this is something that's unique because some people, and I've definitely had jobs and things that I've done where I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And it might have been very, very clear, but I think that people could see just how much I love it.
It's like sort of like your joy space, right? The space where like even if it's hard, it still brings you joy. That for everybody, I think the answer of what attracts people to them is that they may not actually identify that, right? Because there are people who've answered the question, been on the podcast, or we just have had conversations with who will say what their skill is, but that doesn't necessarily resonate to what brings out the joy and magic. So sometimes there's that crossover. I think what you're saying it is for you, but not always the case. It's not always the case. And so I love that you're like, they're going to come and see me in my joy, right? In my talent and my joy at the same space. Love that. So Crystal, tell me, how can people find out more about you, what you do, and connect with you? Tell the audience what they can do.
Yes. So I would love to keep up and engage with you. I'm a lot more active on Instagram, I guess, than other platforms, but I'm also on LinkedIn. So my Instagram is Common Curtsy. And I want to talk about this a little bit, Paula, since we're here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to. Yes. So, early on, I had asked you for advice on whether to have 2 social, 2 Instagrams and trying to figure, it's like the question in life, right? 1 or 2 pages. And so for the longest, I really tried to do the 1 page. And then I said, well, I'll just save or start up the other one and see. And so I'm doing both, but I feel like sometimes I'm like, I should just be doing 1 and it's crazy, but it's always interesting thinking back to that conversation, trying to figure it out. But yes, so my personal Instagram, I guess, is Common Curtsy, COMMON, and then CURTSEY. And then Washington Etiquette on Instagram as well for the professional one. Yes. Still trying to figure my life out, Paula. And
aren't we all?
The website is Washington Etiquette. I offer a lot of virtual courses, in-person courses. I have some exciting ones coming up. I'm doing a 5-day train the trainer course, doing some full-day adult courses and savoir-vivre and social graces. So like if you've ever wanted to go to a finishing school in Switzerland, I guess, you can at least do it for a day.
I love that. Maybe I'll sign up. I'm like, I've been fancied. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us in the branding room. Everybody tell a friend, especially that one who puts the napkin in their shirt, that to listen to this episode.
Yes,
and
please.
and if you listened on any of the podcast platforms, make sure you also watch us on YouTube because you got to see some of the things that she was doing and showing, and so that you can know what you're supposed to do the next time you're in some place and you don't want to embarrass yourself. Everybody, thanks for coming to the branding room, and I'll see you next time.